Climate change poses significant risks to the long-term economic and fiscal outlook for the UK. Our latest Fiscal Risks and Sustainability Report provides updated and integrated estimates of the long-term economic and fiscal implications of two of the most important aspects of climate change. Firstly, the costs to the UK economy and public finances from the damage caused by higher temperatures and more severe weather. And secondly, the economic and fiscal implications of the government's aim of reducing the UK's carbon emissions to net zero by the middle of the century. Our analysis of the potential costs of climate-related damage is based on two global temperature scenarios, one in which global emissions are reduced to net zero by 2070 and the rise in global average temperatures above pre-industrial levels is kept below 2 degrees Celsius, and one based on current global emissions policies, which would see global emissions remaining close to their current levels and average temperatures continuing to rise to just below 3 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. Our latest estimates of the economic damage associated with rising global temperatures show a reduction in GDP of around 3% in the below 2 degrees scenario by the early 2070s relative to our new climate change baseline. The steeper reduction in GDP in the 3 degree scenario, which falls almost 8% below our baseline projection by the early 2070s. In both scenarios, the near-term damage from climate change is higher than in our 2024 estimate, and in the 3 degree scenario, it is a full 3 percentage points greater by the early 2070s. This results in fiscal costs both from the direct costs to government of responding to more frequent and severe extreme weather events, and the indirect costs of a smaller economy, such as lower tax revenues. Taking account of both these costs as well as the debt interest implications, borrowing is projected to be about 2% of GDP higher than in the no climate change baseline projection by the final year in the below 2 degree scenario, and over 4% of GDP higher in the below 3 degree scenario. As with the economic costs, the fiscal costs of climate-related damage are also significantly higher than our 2024 estimates. Our report also provides updated estimates of the fiscal cost of climate change mitigation from meeting the UK government's commitment to reducing emissions to net zero by 2050. These costs include estimates of the government's share of total costs of transitioning our energy, transport and heating systems and wider economy to renewable energy sources. In our central scenario, total public sector investment over the 25 years to 2050 is estimated to be £257 billion, or around £9.9 billion per year, with the single largest cost arising from switching residential, public and commercial buildings from gas heating to electric heat pumps. Overall, these government investment costs account for around 1/3 of the total fiscal cost of reaching net zero. Achieving net zero is also likely to put significant downward pressure on tax receipts on emissions-related activities, in particular from the loss of fuel duty revenue as people switch from petrol-driven to electric vehicles. We estimate that the total annual receipts lost from decarbonisation could amount to £24.2 billion per year, or about 2/3 of the total fiscal cost of the net zero transition. Our latest estimate of the cumulative fiscal costs of the net zero transition from lost tax revenue and additional government spending, at 21% of GDP by 2050, is 9 percentage points lower than our 2021 estimate. This fall in costs is mainly driven by a reduction in Climate Change Committee's estimates of the whole economy investment cost of adopting net zero technologies. For the first time in this report, we can also combine our estimates of the fiscal costs of climate damage and mitigation into an overall estimate of the fiscal risks from climate change. The reality for a relatively small emitter like the UK is that these costs are likely to be additive rather than substitutes. So, in our central 3 degree scenario, the combined fiscal impact of climate change adds 74% of GDP to government debt by the early 2070s, relative to our latest long-term projection. But these cost estimates are highly uncertain, and as you can see from this chart, this is only one of an array of possible scenarios for the fiscal costs of climate change, which stretch from, on the far left, a low fiscal cost scenario, which increases debt by 34% of GDP in the early 2070s. In this scenario, the government accepts a much lower share of the economy-wide investment costs of getting to net zero and finds a replacement for the lost revenue from motoring taxes. And on the far right, a scenario in which the damage from climate change is twice our central estimate and debt is 137% of GDP higher by the early 2070s. Read the full report on our website at www.obr.uk.